Serious security flaws found in several encrypted cloud providers. WhatsApp takes a small step toward better user privacy. Lots of exciting political and FOSS news, too much to just give you guys a snapshot. There's some good stuff there, trust me, and more. Welcome to Surveillance Report 201, where we are dedicated to keeping you private and secure with the latest news from the past week. I am Nathan from The New Oil.
And I'm Henry from Techlore.
As a reminder, if you get value out of this podcast and you want to support us and keep us going, the best way to do that is Patreon. For $5 a month or more, you get to be part of our Q&A. You get to join our Signal group, which is pretty active. We got a good community going on there. For $10 a month or more, you get the expanded version of the podcast. There's no promo segment, no sponsored ads, and you also get to hear our analysis, our jokes, if you like that kind of thing. Just, more stuff than just the news. If you do not like Patreon and you also do not care about the perks, we have LibrePay, which is sort of like an open source version of Patreon. You can give on a recurring basis, but unfortunately there are no perks. That's not allowed per their terms of service. And if you still do not care about the perks, but you want the maximum level of privacy and security, we have Monero. We still accept that. And as a reminder, if you want to ask us a question one-off, and again, you don't prefer Patreon, we also have XMR Chat, where you can give Monero directly, and in return, you can ask a question. Or you don't have to ask a question. A lot of you guys will just leave a comment that's like, no question, just keep up the good work, and we appreciate you guys. We appreciate all of you. Patreon, LibrePay, Monero. And as a final thing, we just want to say thank you to everyone who tuned in to the live stream last week. It was really, really fun. Seriously, actually, I still do that lame thing where I tell all my friends and family about big things like, new videos and stuff like that, especially if I think it might be relevant to them. And my sister called me afterwards and she was like, hey, no offense, but I thought I was just going to tune in for a couple minutes to show support and then go about my day. But I ended up watching the whole thing. It was really fun. The chat was going off and we had a good time. I think everybody else pretty much had a good time. Sounds like it. So thank you guys for making that a lot of fun. And with that, we'll jump into our highlight story. The headline says severe flaws in end-to-end encrypted cloud storage platforms used by millions. So this is new research from ETH Zurich. We've mentioned them a lot before. They seem to do a lot of really good cybersecurity research there. I believe that's Zurich is Switzerland. Okay, so that would be, I believe that's a university out of Switzerland. And these researchers have found issues with Sync, pCloud, IceDrive, Cfile, and Tresorit, collectively used by more than 22 million people. Man, that's like almost a third of the US if we were to narrow it down to one country.
What?
Oh, no, like 1% of the US. Never mind. I did my math way wrong. That's almost the entire state of Texas, though.
It's like 5%, I think, of the US.
Yeah,
just
you're right.
Quick math.
I did my math wrong. Again, though, Texas, I think, has 28 million people. So yeah, that's almost the whole state of Texas. That's crazy. And I know some of these services are very popular in the privacy community. I've heard pCloud and Tresorit recommended. I personally have used Sync a few times. I think I've seen a few people even talk about IceDrive. The analysis was based on the threat model of an attacker controlling a malicious server that can read, modify, and inject data at will, which is realistic for nation-state actors and sophisticated attackers. So the article has details on each issue exactly. I don't want to include them here because it is very detailed, but as a summary, out of the examined group of 5, Tresorit fared relatively better as the issues discovered do not directly expose file contents or allow for easy data manipulation. Most of the others mainly revolved around lack of proper authentication. IceDrive and pCloud did not respond when Bleeping Computer reached out to them. Cfile chose not to give a comment. Sync basically said that we're going to go ahead and fix this. And Tresorit claimed that basically we're not going to fix this because we've actually got an upcoming feature rolling out that's going to prevent this kind of attack. 2 out of 5 responded, which is not great, if we're being honest. Good on the 2 that did. I think that is a really realistic attack. They said sophisticated hackers can do this. I don't know what that means, but I'm thinking in the context of a data breach and just anyone getting malicious access to a server. So I think this is why we're a big fan of services where you know that the data is safe on the client side. Like a common example is Signal. Signal is designed in such a way where even if the server is compromised, it shouldn't really matter because everything is done at the client level. And I think that's true of, I mean, a lot of the services we recommend, like Proton tries really hard to only ever decrypt things at the client side. I mean, Tuda's probably the same way. It's just, yeah, it's really important to make sure that the server cannot be trusted to defend against these kind of things. I think that's really my only analysis.
For me, the main thing I really want to add here is a little bit of context and perspective, mainly because it's good that we've discovered these issues, but it's good that people were also using platforms where this can even be an issue in the first place. And what I mean by that is if you were using a cloud provider that never had end-to-end encrypted, this is an obvious, yeah, this is always a possibility kind of situation. For context, if you're using something like Google Drive, if you're using something like even iCloud without advanced data protection, there really is no protection you have against a nation state actor taking over the server and just getting the data. The thing is, they don't even have to take over the server. They can just knock on the company and ask them to hand over the encryption key for a specific user. So the fact that these services promise end-to-end encryption is that additional layer of protection that all of you can benefit from. And it's cool that they discovered these issues. Ideally, these issues aren't there in the first place, but the fact that these are kind of the exception and not the rule is, I still think, the value in these services. So I hope these services get up to standard. It was cool not to see Proton Drive caught in this. And also for people who have higher threat models and you don't want to over rely on maybe the claims made by some of these services on how secure their implementation of end-to-end encryption is, you can always use services like Cryptomator to officially encrypt it on your computer locally before it ever leaves your device. And you can use Cryptomator with Google Drive. You can use it with any other cloud provider, pretty much. So those are kind of my takeaways. I think it's really cool to see this research, but I don't want people to get upset with these services because they're trying to do something that most other cloud providers just don't even do. But I still want them to get their security up to standard, and it's disappointing to see them not respond to this. That's what I'd be a little bit more upset about here, not the fact that this exists in the first place. With that said, we will now go into the data breaches. And the first one is that the exposed United Nations database left sensitive information accessible online. This was from a trust fund to end violence against women, which was openly accessible on the internet, revealing more than 115,000 files related to organizations that partner with or receive funding from UN Women. The documents range from staffing information and contracts to letters and even detailed financial audits about organizations working with vulnerable communities around the world, including under repressive regimes. Security researcher Jeremiah Fowler discovered this, which was not password protected or otherwise access controlled, and disclosed the finding to the UN, which secured the database. They emphasize that the ubiquity is exactly why it is important to continue to raise awareness about the threat of such misconfigurations. The UN Women database is a prime example of a small error that could create additional risk for women, children, and LGBTQ people living in hostile situations worldwide. At the organization level, some of the financial audits include bank account information, but more broadly, the disclosures provide granular detail on where each organization gets its funding and how it budgets. The information also includes breakdowns of operating costs and details about employees that could be used to map the interconnections between civil society groups in a country or region.
Insurance admin Landmark says data breach impacts 800,000 people. So Landmark admin is a third-party administrator for insurance companies offering back-office services like new business processing and claims administration for large insurance carriers. So we're not going to list all of the companies that they service here because they're just kind of some unruly names, but there's some pretty big names. If you have any kind of insurance, I encourage you to go check it out. Anyways, the attack occurred in May. This is another Maine Attorney General disclosure. We know about it because of them. And they said, based on the investigation, the following information related to potentially impacted individuals may have been subject to unauthorized access. First name or initial and last name, address, social security number, tax identification number, driver's license number or state-issued ID card, passport number, financial account number, medical information, date of birth, health insurance policy number, and life and annuity policy information. Please note that the information above varies for each potentially impacted individual. Affected individuals will be notified by mail of information that was impacted. Landmark says the investigation is ongoing and will notify affected individuals if more information becomes available.
Here's another healthcare one. Henry Schein discloses a data breach a year after ransomware attack. Henry Schein is a healthcare solutions provider, not provided by me, and is a Fortune 500 company with operations and affiliates in 32 countries with a revenue of over $12 billion. 160,000 people were impacted, and Bleeping Computer contacted them to ask what type of data was stolen, and they did not receive a response. But the company is offering impacted users a free 2 years for Experience Identity Works to help monitor credit history and detect signs of fraud.
Internet Archive has been breached again through stolen access tokens. So Bleeping Computer has received numerous messages from people who received replies to their old Internet Archive removal requests, warning that the organization has been breached as they did not correctly rotate their stolen authentication tokens. So the email read, "It's dispiriting to see that even after being made aware of the breach weeks ago, IA has still not done the due diligence of rotating many of the API keys that were exposed in their GitLab secrets. As demonstrated by this message, this includes a Zendesk token with perms to access 800K plus support tickets sent to info@archive.org since 2018. Whether you were trying to ask a general question or requesting the removal of your site from the Wayback Machine, your data is now in the hands of some random guy. If not me, it'd be someone else." The article notes the email in the headers also pass all DKIM, DMARC, and SPF authentication checks, proving they were sent by an authorized Zendesk server. After publishing the story, Bleeping Computer was told by a recipient of these emails that they had to upload personal identification when requesting removal of a page from the Wayback Machine. The threat actor may now also have access to these attachments depending on the access they had to Zendesk and if they used it to download support tickets. And then this last little bit is just kind of a correction. This flew under our radars personally. This is the first time I saw this, but we did report on this whole Internet Archive thing, so just to set the record straight, on October 9th, Bleeping Computer reported that Internet Archive was hit by 2 different attacks at once last week. A data breach where the site's user data for 33 million users was stolen, and a DDoS attack by a pro-Palestinian group named SN_Black Meta. While both attacks occurred over the same period, they were conducted by different threat actors. However, many outlets incorrectly reported that SN Black Meta was behind the breach rather than just the DDoS. We were wrong about that, and that's the correct info.
United Health says Change Healthcare hack affects over 100 million, which is the largest ever US healthcare data breach. This is an update, and it's the first time that the US health insurance provider that owns the health tech company has put a number of affected individuals to that data breach, after previously saying it anticipated the breach to include data on a substantial portion of people in America. So we've been covering this breach for a while. The update here is we have a kind of a number, which is over 100 million.
Now we'll talk about companies, and we have some pretty good news, I think, for WhatsApp users. WhatsApp now encrypts contact databases for privacy-preserving syncing. The WhatsApp Messenger platform has introduced Identity Proof Linked Storage, or IPLS, a new privacy-preserving encrypted storage system designed for contact management. The new system solves 2 long-standing problems WhatsApp users have been dealing with for years, namely the risk of losing their contact lists if they lose their phone, and the inability to sync contacts between different devices. With IPLS, WhatsApp contact lists will now bind to the account rather than the device, allowing users to easily manage them between device changes or replacements. Additionally, IPLS makes it possible to maintain different contact lists for multiple accounts on the same device, each securely managed and isolated from the rest. There are technical details in the article for those who are curious, and TechCrunch also noted that this means that usernames are now technically possible in WhatsApp. I'm not sure if they mean like usernames in the same sense of Signal, where you don't need somebody's phone number to message them, or if they just mean like giving somebody a nickname.
Apple will pay security researchers up to $1 million to hack its private AI cloud. So this is from Apple Security Blog, and the company said it would pay that $1 million bounty to anyone who reports exploits capable of remotely running malicious code on its private cloud compute servers. They'd reward researchers up to $250K for privately reporting exploits capable of extracting user-sensitive information or the prompts that customers submit to the company's private cloud. Apple said it would consider any security issue that has a significant impact outside of a published category, including up to $150K for exploits capable of accessing sensitive user information from a privileged network position.
This next story comes from DuckDuckGo. The title says investing in privacy-respecting companies that are raising the standard of trust online. Quoting the blog post, as more and more consumers seek privacy-conscious technologies, we want to partner with other like-minded entrepreneurs and help turn their vision into reality. With the core objective of supporting consumer privacy technologies, DuckDuckGo is actively investing in early-stage companies as well as pursuing acquisitions and partnerships. We've actually already been doing this quietly for the last couple years, and we're energized to do more. So they say they are primarily focused on 3 areas or 3 domains. First is search and browse. It is the core of our product and where we continue to invest most heavily. The second is consumer privacy technologies. And they mentioned that, for example, this spring, we launched Privacy Pro, a 3-in-1 subscription with a VPN, personal information removal, and identity theft restoration. Our acquisition of Removely was key to accelerating the development of our personal information removal service solution. We continue to look for other complementary technologies that could extend our offerings. And the last is emerging technologies. We recently announced DuckDuckGo AI Chat, which offers private access to popular AI chatbots. We're committed to investing in this emerging technology space and others, but only in ways that are privacy respecting.
Well, I just had to ask Nate what this was because we really condensed these notes. But in research, we just have one article here, and it's about Pwn to Own, which is a event happening in
Ireland.
Yeah, there you go.
It's Ireland this year.
So far, we're just summarizing this. There's been some 0 days. Day 1 had 52 0 days, including Lorex, QNAP, Canon, HP, and more. Day 2 had 51, including Samsung Galaxy S24, Sonos, Canon again, QNAP again, and more. And then day 3 had 11, including Synology, Lexmark, QNAP again, and more.
That'll take us into politics, and we have some pretty exciting stories this week. The first one says lawsuit argues warrantless use of flock surveillance cameras is unconstitutional. So a civil liberties organization has filed a federal lawsuit in Virginia arguing that widespread surveillance enabled by Flock, which is a company that sells networks of automated license plate readers, is unconstitutional under the Fourth Amendment. Quoting the lawsuit, the city of Norfolk, Virginia has installed a network of cameras that make it functionally impossible for people to drive anywhere without having their movements tracked, photographed, and stored in an AI-assisted database that enables the warrantless surveillance of their every move. This civil rights lawsuit seeks to end this dragnet surveillance program. In Norfolk, no one can escape the government's 172 blinking eyes, it continues, referring to the 172 Flock cameras currently operational in the city. The lawsuit is being filed by the Institute for Justice, a civil liberties organization that has filed a series of privacy and government overreach lawsuits in the last few years. One of the lawyers on the case told 404 that the lawsuit could have easily been filed in any of the more than 5,000 communities where Flock is active, but that Norfolk made the most sense because the Circuit Court of Appeals, which Norfolk is part of, recently held that persistent warrantless drone surveillance in Baltimore is unconstitutional under the Fourth Amendment in a case called Beautiful Struggle versus Baltimore Police Department. We actually covered that. We talked about the lovely, lovely Winter Soldier drone that was supposed to be flying above Baltimore 24/7 and recording everything all the time. And the government's argument was basically nothing to fear, nothing to hide. Is that the statement? So earlier this year, a Virginia state court ordered that information pulled from a Flock camera without a warrant and used in a robbery case had to be suppressed because it violated the defendant's Fourth Amendment rights. In that case, the judge noted, quote, "It would not be difficult for mistakes to be made tying law-abiding citizens to crime due to the nature of the Flock system, and in the event a law enforcement officer would seek to create a suspect where one did not otherwise exist, it would be a simple task," unquote.
The SEC has come forward and they're starting to charge tech companies for downplaying the SolarWinds breaches. So they've charged Unisys Corp, Avaya Holdings, Checkpoint Software, and Mimecast for allegedly misleading investors about the impact of their breaches during the massive 2020 SolarWinds Orion hack. These companies agreed to pay civil penalties, and they will pay $4 million. That's Unisys. Avaya will pay $1 million. Checkpoint will pay a little bit under $1 million, and then Mimecast will pay a little under $1 million as well. The SEC's orders against Unisys find that the company described its risks from cybersecurity events as hypothetical, despite knowing that it had experienced 2 SolarWinds-related intrusions involving exfiltration of gigabytes of data. The SEC's investigation found that Avaya claimed that the threat actors only accessed a limited number of email messages when they knew that at least 145 files in its cloud storage environment were accessed as well. The investigation into Checkpoint found that the company knew it was breached, but downplayed the impact by using generic terms. And for Mimecast, the SEC found that the company downplayed the attack by not disclosing the nature of the code that was stolen and the number of encrypted credentials accessed during the breach.
Pinterest. They are facing an EU privacy complaint over tracking ads. The visual discovery engine's use of tracking ads is the target of the latest complaint from European privacy rights nonprofit NOIB, which stands for None of Your Business. They are accusing it of breaching the bloc's GDPR, or General Data Protection Regulation, by failing to obtain consent from users to being tracked and profiled for advertising. As the article notes, while Pinterest has generally flown under the radar with regard to online privacy issues, especially compared to other mainstream ad-funded social services such as Facebook, it's worth recalling that the company's tracking and profiling was pulled center stage in the tragic case of the suicide in 2017 of the UK schoolgirl Molly Russell. She had pro-suicide content pushed into her social feeds by a number of apps, including Pinterest. A 2022 Prevention of Future Deaths report by the UK coroner found that, quote, negative effects of online content, unquote, were a factor in her death. It was the result of the ad-funded platform's pervasive tracking and profiling of users. In the Noib-backed complaint against Pinterest, which had been filed with France's Data Protection Authority, the platform is also accused of failing to fulfill a GDPR data access request. It did not provide information on the categories of data about the complaint that were shared with third parties.
LinkedIn has been fined $335 million in the EU for tracking ads and privacy breaches. Well, tracking ads, privacy breaches. It's weird wording. So these penalties are pretty heavy, and they've been issued by Ireland's Data Protection Commission under the European Union's General Data Protection Regulation. The regulator found a raft of breaches, including breaches to the lawfulness, fairness, and transparency of its data processing in the area. LinkedIn has sought to claim variously consent, legitimate interests, and contractual necessity-based legal bases for processing people's information when obtained directly and or from third parties to track and profile its users for behavioral advertising. The DPC found none were valid. LinkedIn also failed to comply with the GDPR principles of transparency and fairness. As well as being fined, LinkedIn has been given 3 months to bring its European operations into compliance with the GDPR.
That'll take us into the free and open source news. We're going to start with concerns raised over Bitwarden moving further away from open source. Honestly, I'm kind of quoting most of the whole article here because it's a very short article. Following a recent pull request to the Bitwarden client that introduces a, quote, Bitwarden/SDK-internal, unquote, dependency to build the desktop client, there is the following clause on the license statement. You may not use this SDK to develop applications for use with software other than Bitwarden, including non-compatible implementations of Bitwarden, or to develop another SDK. The issue of this effectively not making the Bitwarden client free software was raised in a GitHub issue. Other users have chimed in being concerned over this change and the SDK not being legally permitted for use outside of Bitwarden proper. Bitwarden founder and CTO Kyle Spearin has commented on the ticket this morning. Quote, we have been progressing the use of our SDK in more use cases for our clients. However, our goal is to make sure that the SDK is used in a way that maintains GPL compatibility. 1, the SDK and the client are 2 separate programs. 2, code for each program is in separate repositories. And 3, the fact that the 2 programs communicate using standard protocols does not mean they are one program for the purposes of GPL v3. Being able to build the app as you are trying to do here is an issue we plan to resolve and is merely a bug. The ticket was subsequently locked and limited to collaborators. We'll see what comes ahead for Bitwarden and open source.
Yeah, I think a quick update. I don't know if you got this. It happened like within the last 24 hours, and it was done very casually. Bitwarden GPL the license on their internal SDK on their GitHub. So it's now covered by both GPL v3 and their own Bitwarden SDK license 1.0, which should resolve this problem for people. So encrypted chat app session leaves Australia after visit from police. Linton said that last year, the Australian Federal Police visited a session employee at their home in the country. So they just showed up at their house. There was no warrant used or meeting organized. They just went to their apartment complex, knocked on the front door, and asked about the session app, the company, and the employee's history on the project. The officers also asked about an ongoing investigation related to a specific session user. Part of Session's frustration around the incident came from the AFP deciding to visit an employee at home rather than arranging a meeting through their proper and publicly available channels. They ended up wanting to organize another meeting at which they asked quite a lot more technical questions about Session and some broad questions about future development. The AFP told 404 Media in a statement that the AFP is aware of the application Session and has seen the use of Session by offenders while committing serious Commonwealth offenses. The AFP declined to comment specifically on the incident involving the Session employee.
The SyncThing Android app is being discontinued, but alternatives remain available. So Simon Frey, the maintainer of SyncThing, has announced the retirement of the official Android application. The decision stems from challenges in publishing on Google Play and the lack of recent development and active maintenance for the app. Frey cited insufficient motivation to continue maintaining the app given its dormancy and the difficulties with Play releases. The final release of the app will be available on GitHub and F-Droid alongside the December 2024 SyncThing version. Users seeking alternatives, and this is coming from alternative2.net just for context, users seeking alternatives can run SyncThing in Termux on Android, though this option lacks the user-friendliness of the dedicated app. Despite the discontinuation of the official app, SyncThing remains available for use on Android devices through other means.
Yeah, so I don't know why Alternative 2, maybe they didn't know because I didn't know either. There actually is already a fork that's existed for a long time, and it's called SyncThing Fork. Pretty easy to remember. There actually were a lot of enhancements they made from the SyncThing project. So you can sync every hour to save some more battery. There's some UI differences. They solve some battery issues in different areas. There's a SyncThing camera. There's just a lot of changes they make. And they actually have instructions on their site for how to switch from the now deprecated official version to their version. Pretty much what that looks like is you go to SyncThing, you go into settings and create a backup. and then you import that back up into the Syncthing fork. That's kind of probably the best option for all you people who still want to use Syncthing on the Android. My only thing that I'm not familiar with, because I'm not super familiar in the development of this and who's behind it, I don't know how much work this fork was putting into actually maintaining kind of the entire project. So I don't know if the fork will continue to make improvements and enhancements and fully take over what the project used to be, or if it was more of just a wrapper that added a few things on top of what they were doing. Kind of a big Mullvad news roundup. So we're going to go through it. First, Mullvad is currently not available on Amazon. Amazon mistakenly listed their physical vouchers as digital ones, causing their systems to process Mullvad orders as digital deliveries. They're working with Amazon to correct this. In the meantime, Mullvad is available directly on mullvad.net, where you can purchase using various payment options, and there actually are other places, like I think there's Proxy Store and many other places to get Mullvad. They've now also introduced ShadowSock's obfuscation for WireGuard. This is a new feature available on desktop and Android apps and will come to iOS later. ShadowSock is a fast and lightweight protocol that obfuscates traffic, making it harder for firewalls to detect and block the traffic. Proxying via ShadowSock is not new to the app. It's been the default setting for OpenVPN bridges since version 2019.2. With this update, users who had previously needed OpenVPN to bypass network restrictions can actually switch to using WireGuard while still maintaining a similar level of obfuscation. That's super exciting for people who need to use Mullvad on networks and different areas that have them blocked. And then, but their feature Data, which is DAITA, which is an acronym for Data Against AI-Guided Traffic Analysis. We've talked about this in the past. Essentially, what they do is they inject random bits of information into your traffic to make sure that people aren't able to analyze your traffic as easily and tell what you're doing through the VPN tunnel. This feature is now available on Android and can be enabled in the settings. So that's the update. That's one more platform that now supports Data.
And that'll take us into the Misfits, where we just have one really quick story. AdGuard is having a Halloween promo. Protect yourself and become the hero of your online kingdom. It's up to 40% off on licenses. If you're on iOS, I know that's what Privacy Guides recommends for blocking ads and trackers. And that's all the news we had this week. Again, we had some serious security flaws in several encrypted cloud providers. If you are using any of them, make sure you're updating on the ones who said they would fix it. And on the ones who didn't reply, you do with that information what you will. WhatsApp has taken a small step towards better user privacy by creating a more privacy-friendly way to share contacts, and tons of political news and FOSS news. It was kind of a busy week. Remember that if you get value out of this podcast, it is not free to produce. It takes a lot of time to edit, to collect the stories, to afford the gear, to record it, all that kind of stuff. So if you want to keep us going, we really appreciate it. There is Patreon if you want to get something in return. For $5 a month, you can be part of the Signal group chat, and you can leave a question on the Q&A that we will answer every week. If you subscribe at $10 a month or more, you get the extended version of this podcast. There's no promo segment. There's more analysis and stuff like that. If you are not interested in the perks, but you still want a recurring way to support us that you don't have to think about, we do have LibrePay. It's kind of a more privacy-respecting version of Patreon, but again, there are no perks. And if you just want the maximum level of privacy and security, we have Monero. We have supported Monero for quite some time. We're big fans. And on that note, if you just want to ask us a question, but again, you're not a fan of Patreon, we do have XMR chat. You can leave us a tip and then ask a question, and we will answer it on the Q&A. And of course, if you are unable to afford any funds right now, we totally understand. We still appreciate you liking, subscribing, commenting, sharing the podcast around, and all that kind of stuff. So thank you for listening. Links to all the stories can be found in the show notes, as always. And if you have a story you think we should cover, you can send it to news@surveillancereport.tech. The final thing we want to ask of you is to please share the podcast around. Again, we do not do any paid marketing around here. So it is 100% word of mouth or, the algorithm on YouTube. And we're really dependent on you guys to share stories with loved ones. The Surveillance Clips channel, it really does work. I've sent some stories to friends and family lately, and they respond in a way that tells me they actually watched it. So it's a great way to share just small stories. We try to pick the most relevant stories that you guys might want to share with your loved ones. So again, please subscribe because we do have updates all the time on older stories. Give us a rating if you're on a platform where that's an option. It really does help. We're trying to reach as many people as possible with the message of privacy, and every little thing helps us. So thank you again for listening, and we'll be back next week.